Is your HOA always this fair? Paper slap. Elaine Porter taped a notice, 12-07, right on my gate and said, 10 days or we remove it. She called it aesthetic, then drove off her heels, ticking like a countdown while my camera light blinked red. By dawn, a banker stamped a compliance hold, radio click, freezing their construction loan as the porch light glared on the empty road. Next week, their clubhouse stayed dark, and every neighbor knew the rule they broke had finally met the law they ignored. The door chime split the morning quiet at 7:12 a.m. Through the frosted glass, I saw the shape of a clipboard and a red badge. Elaine Porter, chair of the HOA, stood at the end of my walk with two assistants in identical windbreakers. She didn't wave, just held up a single sheet of paper white against the damp air. Notice 12-07, she said flatly. You'll remove this gate within 10 days. The fog still clung to the fence posts. My breath ghosted as I stepped closer. Under what authority, Elaine didn't blink. Aesthetic corridor. You know that clause. Behind her, the security light over my driveway pulsed once recording. The red LED blinked silent witness. I tapped my phone to sync the camera feed, and a small green icon confirmed recording. Let's make sure the record's clear, I said quietly. This gate was approved in 1958 under Easement 44B. Her eyes narrowed. Old easements don't override current design standards. She pressed the notice against the iron latch. The glue strip crackled. Filed 4/12/07. Clerk, Ref, PVC 334. The print at the bottom gleamed with moisture. I angled my phone toward her voice, capturing every syllable. We'll remove it by dawn, she told one of her aides, not realizing the mic had already caught it. The phrase landed like a gavel. By dawn. I kept my tone even. Then I'll assume this is a formal order, she turned halfway. It's a courtesy, don't test it. Her heels clicked against the stone path as she walked back to the SUV idling by the curb. One assistant stayed long enough to photograph the latch again, flash popping in the gray air. I zoomed in, framing the plaque on the gate, bronze letters worn smooth. Private access, 1958. My hand shook only once long enough for the autofocus to stutter. I steadied it and hit save. A low hum from the gate's keypad filled the silence. I pressed playback on my phone. Elaine's voice repeated cold and perfect. We'll remove it by dawn. I exhaled, noted. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked loud enough to mark the seconds I had left before this became a fight. I dialed Darius on speaker. They're escalating. I've got a notice code 1207. Recorded her saying they'd remove it. He sighed. Hold the paper up to the camera. I did. You see the filing stamp, yeah. PVC 334. Keep everything digital, Ray. No yelling, no threats. Just document. I'm calm, I said, though my pulse said otherwise. But if they touch that gate, then we'll file before they do, he cut in. Send me the footage. And remember, stay clean. Let them overreach first. Through the front window, I caught the reflection of the gate again, the dull sheen of the plaque catching morning light. For 66 years, it had marked the line between my home and theirs, between respect and intrusion. Elaine's SUV pulled away, spraying a fan of gravel. Something metallic clicked behind her, a small sound like a screw backing out of metal. I stepped outside and found the top hinge slightly loose. Not broken, not forced, just loosened, as if someone wanted to make a point. The security camera swiveled once its motor giving a soft beep. The red LED blinked. Recording still. I whispered, a gate isn't vanity, it's respect. Then my phone chimed a motion alert from the same camera. HOA vehicle returned. Photographing latch. The feed stuttered once before freezing on Elaine's assistant phone raised flash cutting through fog. I stared at the frozen frame. They weren't done. Not by dawn. Not ever. The diner's bell chirped as I stepped in from the gray morning. Bacon hissed on the flat top. The coffee smelled a little burned the way it always did when the morning rush ran late. On the corkboard by the door, someone had posted a flyer for a yard sale and a photo of a missing tabby with a blue collar. Maggie Tran slid into the booth across from me and set a ceramic mug down between us. She was early. Bankers usually are. "Your HOA's been drawing on a construction loan." She said no preamble. Special assessment on residents secured by the clubhouse improvements. I felt the words settle in my chest like a level finding true. "They served a notice on my gate at dawn." "Section?" she asked. "HOA-1207. Clerk, Ref, PVC 334. Maggie opened a slim folder and turned it so I could read. The language was precise, clean as a scalpel. No material legal dispute allowed during draws. Collateral must be free of pending claims that could impact value or access. She tapped the covenant with a pink nail. If there's a dispute, they can't keep pulling money. I looked past her to the window. My truck was parked nose-out, camera pointed at the road. I didn't like coincidences. I liked rules. They told me, "We'll remove it by dawn," I said. Maggie's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. "Said on record, camera, caught it. Audio's clean." "Then they're skating on the clause," she said. "If the gate is part of the access described in the original filings, any interference becomes a live dispute, and that Ray is a problem for draws." The waitress topped us off and left 2 menus we didn't open. My phone buzzed on the Formica Darius. I answered. Elaine posted 141207. "We've got video." "Good," he said. "You're going to file a notice of dispute today. Bring the affidavit, timestamps, and stills. We'll walk it across to the clerk and get it stamped. Copy the bank's compliance inbox on the filing email." Maggie nodded like she could hear him. "CC Everbank Compliance." "Which address?" I asked. She pulled a card, wrote a second email on the back, and slid it over. "Use both." I took a breath and found my father's voice in the space between the coffee steam and the diner noise gate means respect. "Mark your lines." He'd said it outside the shop the day we installed the first hinge, his hands black with stain and spring wind in his hair. He wasn't one for speeches. He didn't have to be. Maggie watched me drift and then snapped me back with a question. "What does the plaque say again?" "Private access, 1958. "Good. Photograph it close then wide with the road visible. Document continuity." I nodded. "You talk like an auditor." "I used to be," she said, "in another life." The corkboard by the door rattled when the mailman leaned in to grab a refill. He waved his cup at Maggie. "On me today," she said, and he grinned, already gone. Ray Darius said in my ear, "We're not swinging. We're setting forms. After you file, send me 10 stills and the raw clip. I'll label. Then we send a short letter, 'Material dispute exists regarding gate removal and access.'" No adjectives. Understood. Maggie slid a printout across the table, a 1-page excerpt of the covenant with the relevant paragraph highlighted. If they argue, aesthetic corridor, the bank will ask one question. Does this action create uncertainty of access or impair recorded use? If yes, the covenant kicks. It isn't about pretty, it's about risk. The waitress set down 2 plates we hadn't ordered. Hash browns shed a small avalanche onto the table, and I realized I hadn't eaten since the notice. I took a forkful. It tasted like salt and survival. My phone pinged again. Received. 10:46, gate cam latch area. Another ping followed received. 10:46, HOA personnel at hinge. Maggie's eyes flicked to the screen. "They're working the hardware photographing, maybe more." She lowered her voice until it rode just above the sizzle from the grill. "If they remove it now, it's damage during dispute. That's the phrase. Banks don't like that phrase." "Neither do I," I said. The diner felt suddenly smaller. The hum of the cooler. The click of a sugar caddy. The card on the table with Maggie's second compliance address stared up at me like a key waiting on a lock. "Okay," I said. "We file." "Today," Darius repeated. "I'll meet you at the office. Bring your ID, utility bill, and property description. Clerk likes tidy packets." Maggie finished her coffee and capped her pen. "I'll be in the branch at 2. If compliance calls, I'll confirm receipt and read the clause into the note. I won't editorialize." "Good," I said. I don't need anyone to take a side. I need the rules to do their job." She gave me a thin smile. Boundaries aren't rude, they're honest. Outside, a gust lifted the corner of the yard sale flyer and slapped it back against the cork. I folded Maggie's card into my wallet, slid the covenant excerpt into my folder, and stacked the napkins, suddenly bothered by disorder. "Text me." The file name she said standing. "Use plain language, no jokes. Auditors hate cute." Notice of dispute. PVC 334. R. Hanlon. "PDF," I said. "That'll do." I paid in cash. The waitress scratched my name on a guest check with a heart in the loop of the Y. I didn't recognize the kindness, but I pocketed it anyway. At the door, the bell chirped again. Sun tried to push through the cloud shelf and failed. I paused, opened the camera app, and checked the live feed. Elaine's assistant stood at my gate phone up, measuring the distance between latch and post with the 2 fingers like that could replace a tape. I tightened my grip on the folder until the cardboard creaked. The truck's dash cam indicator glowed. Recording. I stepped onto Main Street. The diner door swung shut behind me, and the bell went quiet. The printer gave a single beep and spit a warm page into the tray. Toner smell. Fluorescent buzz. Darius slid the sheet close and read aloud, steady as a court clerk. Notice of dispute. PVC 334. He checked the footer date, time, parcel number, then initialed the bottom corner like a carpenter marking a true cut. Good. Chain of custody starts now. His office was the smallest on the hall walls, crowded with county maps under plastic. A steel ruler lay across a stack of folders. A brass scale sat dead center on a bookshelf, one pan slightly heavier than the other as if the room leaned toward fact. "Photos first," he said. I unlocked my phone and airdropped the stills. Gate head-on, gate 3/4, gate with the road in frame. Plaque close-up. Private access, 1958. Latch. Hinge. Audio, Darius said. I cued the clip. Elaine's voice filled the space, tinny but clean. "We'll remove it by dawn." He nodded once. "We don't argue with that. We just attach it." He pulled a fresh page and typed the caption. "Block Exhibit A, Gate Approval, 1958 copy, Exhibit B. Video timestamped Exhibit C. Still photographs, 9. Exhibit D, audio, transcript, 1 page. Exhibit E, map, recorded easement and access. County GIS." He hit print. Beep. "Affidavits?" he asked. I laid 2 on the desk. Neighbors across the lane saw HOA personnel at the latch. Names and phone numbers at the bottom. Darius read the second one twice, then slid it into the pile. Good. Not dramatic, just specific. He stapled the notice of dispute to a cover page with my parcel description. Then he pulled out a blank police form and handed me a pen. Police report numbered A22149. Facts only. Unauthorized interference with access gate. Dates, times, names you can swear to. I wrote slow block letters. The pen scratched. The fluorescent hum seemed to grow louder when I wrote Elaine's name. I stopped, swallowed once, and finished the line. Darius scanned each page, file name simple and literal, notice of dispute, PVC 334, PDF, affidavit, Caldwell, PDF, affidavit.sharp. PDF. Audio, a clip, will remove an IT 0512 MP3. He didn't smile at my audio title. He did nod at the hyphens. "Okay," he said. Email. He dictated the subject line while I typed. Subject material dispute. Affecting collateral. Pine Creek Estates. Gate access in the body. Dear Clerk, Everbank Compliance. This email provides notice of a material dispute involving the removal of a long-standing access gate at parcel, recorded easement enclosed. The HOA has posted notice, year 1207, and indicated an intent to remove the gate by dawn. Exhibits attached. R. Hanlon. I paused over the CC line. Maggie's card lay face up. 2 compliance addresses printed in neat ink. I added both. Attach the police report when you get the number, Darius said. For now, the incident form as pending. We walked the packet down the hall to the clerk. The glass window had a small round speaker that made voices sound a step away from human. The clerk, a woman I knew from post office lines and PTA fundraisers a lifetime ago, flipped each page stamped the corner with a deliberate rhythm and slid a receipt through the slot. Stamped, she said. You'll get the incident number by email once the officer uploads. Back in Darius's office, I plugged my phone into his PC and dragged the files into the message. Progress bars crept like paint drying. Read the subject again, he said. I read it. He pointed at the dash. That dash is your cause to effect. You're not threatening. You're documenting. We let the rules move on their own track. I hit send. The outbox hung, then blinked empty. We stared at the screen until the room felt like a held breath. Server Darius said, as if invoking a cautious animal. Come on. The monitor flashed a small green check. A second later, the reply popped. Received. 03:17 a.m. The time punch looked wrong in the daylight overnight maintenance cycle clearing late. Darius didn't care. Time-stamped is time-stamped. I leaned back and felt something give in my chest slack in a rope I'd been hauling since dawn. Darius gathered the leftovers, the spare prints, the sticky note with my CAD parcel number, the audio transcript, and slid them into a red folder marked Pine Creek. Ray, he said. Say it back to me. Paper beats posture, I said. He shook his head. All the way. I exhaled. If power's on paper, then file. That's the rule, he said. He pointed to the brass scale on the shelf. We don't outshout, we outrecord. My phone pinged. Police report, number A22149, filed. A second ping. Auto AC from compliance with a ticket number and a short line reviewing for covenant risk. It wasn't warm. It didn't need to be. I opened my photo roll to pull one last still. The frame showed the gate's plaque at a slight angle, bronze scuffed. Another frame later caught it again, this time bent where it must have struck the gravel. The letters were bruised with dirt. Darius leaned over my shoulder when, between 10:30 and 11. Motion alert fired twice. Attach the bent one, he said. File name plain. I saved it as plaque bent JPG and dragged it into a fresh message addressed to the same thread. Caption line, additional exhibit status of plaque after HOA presence near latch. My cursor hovered over send. Outside the window, a delivery truck hissed at the curb. Someone laughed in the hallway. The fluorescent hum went a note higher. I clicked. The screen flashed once, then steadied on the little paperclip icon shining like a held breath. At 04:41 a.m., the kitchen was a small blue planet. The laptop screen glowed against the dark window. The rest of the house held its breath. The fridge motor kept a steady projector hum that sounded like a distant theater just before the reel starts. My inbox stacked identical subjects like fence pickets. Draw number 11, pending. Draw number 11, pending. Draw number 11, pending. I rubbed the cold from my hands, clicked the latest message, and attached what Darius had labeled an hour earlier. Notice of dispute, PVC334.PDF. Affidavit, Caldwell, PDF, affidavit, sharp. PDF, audio or clip will remove it 05. 12. MP3, police report, A2149, PDF. My phone buzzed once. Maggie. I answered without leaving the screen. I'm ready. Her voice came quiet like she'd stepped into a bank conference room and pulled the door shut with 2 fingers. I need the police report scan to complete the set. Sent, I said. Check the thread. I heard keys on her end. Got it. Hanlon. This qualifies for compliance hold. You've met the language material dispute affecting access and recorded use. The fridge hummed. The house popped once, adjusting to the temperature drop. I breathed fog into the window and wiped a circle clear with my sleeve. Out on the county road, my gate stood a dark shape against a darker field. The plaque looked dull from here, a scuffed coin in a pocket no one checked. "What happens to draw 11?" I asked. "Best case." Maggie said it pauses until the dispute's resolved. Worst case, it converts to review and the covenants trigger a freeze on subsequent draws. A beat. I'm pushing it to review. How long? She didn't think long. "Give me 16 minutes. I glanced at the stove clock, 04:43, and set my phone face down so I wouldn't watch the seconds crawl. The laptop fan spooled up. Somewhere outside, a lone pickup passed tires whispering on damp asphalt. The house settled again, a small tick in the hallway. Then the silence returned. I opened the compliance email and read my own words a second time. Material dispute, affecting collateral, Pine Creek Estates. Gate access. No adjectives, just the line. Darius had drilled it into me. We don't outshout, we outrecord. At 04:51, the inbox blinked. Auto, AC compliance intake received. At 05:03, compliance assigned analyst, MT. At 05:14, a calendar tick. Someone in the bank switched to a different view. I stood, poured coffee I didn't need, and carried the heat back to the window. In the weak reflection, my face looked older than yesterday. The security camera at the gate winked a red LED and went still. No motion. Ray Maggie, again softer. "I'm reading the clause into the note. I'm not editorializing." Understood. Also, she added, I CC'd the HOA treasurer. Awareness only. It's standard when collateral risk touches governance. The cursor hovered in my inbox like a held breath. At 05:31, a new subject appeared, thicker font, not a template. Draw number 11 under covenant review. My thumb hovered over the phone screen. I didn't call Darius. I didn't want his voice to bump the moment. 2 minutes, Maggie whispered. If their treasurer is watching, they'll see it too. The house went even quieter, the hum thinning to a wire. Outside, the road took a long pause. A truck idled behind the clubhouse hedge line, a shape I recognized from the camera, HOA maintenance. White cab, amber bar, no decals. At 05:57, the laptop gave a bright ding that felt like a door unlatching. Draw suspended compliance hold. Underneath the header stacked addresses like witnesses to projects at Everbank Compliance at Everbank CC Treasurer at PCE HOA Clerk at county.gov r.hanlon at email. I clicked the message. The first sentence read like a verdict, pursuant to covenant language. Draw number 11 is suspended pending resolution of material dispute impacting access and recorded use. The second line named the parcel. The third referenced my police report, number A2149. There wasn't a fourth line. There didn't need to be. My phone chirped a duplicate alert. Maggie again, not asking, just confirming. It's posted. Copy, I said. Through the window, a small square of light came on in the dark mass of the clubhouse, the treasurer's office, probably. A minute later, the idling truck at the hedge clicked into reverse taillights flaring and eased away like someone backing out of a bad plan. I'm noting the time, Maggie said. By sunrise, your footage will show a change in behavior. That's all we ever need in an audit before and after. I almost laughed, but it wasn't a funny morning. Why does it feel like I'm trespassing in my own kitchen? Because power is quiet when it's real, she said, gentle. It doesn't have to shout. It just moves the ledger. She paused long enough to let the words seat. Respect lines, or the ledger will. We stayed on the line without talking. The coffee cooled fast in the blue light. I watched the gate and thought of my father wiping stain from the hinge with the back of his hand, saying nothing, just checking the swing. A notification from the security app pushed onto the screen. Maintenance truck left geofence 0602. Then another, no activity, 0609. The eastern ridge finally cracked. A weak silver seam appeared between the tree line and the cloud shelf. One upstairs window in a house across the way lit up, then another. Morning doing what it always does, reminding people there's a clock bigger than whatever paper they signed. At 06:17, a thin stripe of gold edged the top of my gate. The camera captured the color shift and drew a timestamp across it as if to notarize the sun. I set the coffee down and exhaled. Maggie, I'm here. I owe you. No, she said quickly. This is the covenant doing what it's supposed to do. Outside, the road brightened to gray. By sunrise, the trucks turned around. The gate stayed where it had been since 1958, tired, loyal, stubborn as family. The fridge motor clicked off. The kitchen went still enough to hear my own breath. I closed the laptop just as the first real light pushed across the sill and into the room, thin and absolute. Rain braided down the clubhouse windows, soft ropes of water that made the parking lot lamps blur like tired eyes. Inside, the room was full again, metal chairs, damp coats, the smell of wool and paper. The flag at the far wall hung perfectly still, as if even air didn't want to sway. Boone stood without waiting to be recognized. Former Army chin like a plumb line. He didn't raise his voice. Motion to remove Elaine Porter as president. The room inhaled. The board table stiffened as one body. A few people shifted jackets, squeaked. The clerk looked at the chair, then at Boone, then down at her box of ballots. Her pen hovered, then landed. Motion is on the floor, she said. Is there a second? Second came from the back. Ms. Sharp with the careful posture of someone who'd read every bylaw twice. Elaine stared straight ahead. This is a temporary glitch, she said into the mic. Draw 11 was suspended due to a misunderstanding. Funds are secure. Work continues. Boone didn't sit. It wasn't a misunderstanding, he said. It was a material dispute you created. A murmur ran the length of the room. Someone near the door said too loud, "You lied about the funds." The clerk rapped once with a small gavel that looked like it had never done any real work. "Order," she said softly. "We'll proceed with statements then, a vote per Section 9. Darius touched my sleeve in the second row. "No speeches," he whispered. "Let the process do the heavy lifting." I nodded and kept my hands open on my knees. My father would have approved. He believed in tools and rules, things that held their shape under pressure. Elaine adjusted the mic. We removed a non-compliant gate to preserve the aesthetic corridor and ensure resale values. That's our responsibility. A man in a damp ball cap rose 2 rows over. Your responsibility is to the truth, he said. Draw 11 was suspended because the bank saw risk. We saw your emails. Boone lifted his palm not to silence the room but to gather it. I want the minutes to reflect that the bank's compliance hold came before sunrise the morning after the notice, and that the treasurer was CC'd, and that the phrase, "by dawn," was spoken at my neighbor's gate. All heads turned to the clerk. She nodded, tapped keys, and said, "Entered." Rain tapped the glass like keys on a shallow keyboard. Somewhere in the room, a phone buzzed against a purse and was muted. Boone looked at me and then at the table. My father taught me a thing or two about lines. He used to say, "Boundaries are respect." We've forgotten that. We treated a neighbor's boundary like it was a suggestion. Then the ledger answered us. The mic didn't crackle. His words sat down where people could see them. A board member to Elaine's left cleared his throat. We should consider the optics of removing a president during a storm. Boone ignored the weather. Consider the optics of lying to a bank. The clerk opened the ballot box and began laying out stacks, blue for retain, white for remove. She counted them aloud by tens, the numbers a metronome in the damp room. 10, 20, 30. Elaine tried one last tack. If I step down now, the HOA looks weak. No, Darius said under his breath, not into a mic, not for the room. Now is when you look governed. The clerk finished the stacks and handed a sleeve of pens down each row. People bent to write. The room quieted into that particular hush where paper carries its own sound. Beside the ballot box, a tripod-mounted camera blinked a red dot recording as if to give the night a memory. When the clerk collected the first row, she called out names to confirm receipt. Caldwell, Hanlon, Sharp, Boone. Each name answered here and passed a folded square forward. As the last ballots came in, a gust pushed rain against the glass, and the flag didn't move. Boone remained standing. The clerk poured the ballots onto the table and began flipping them open with the repetitive economy of someone who understands that fairness can be a tactile thing. She read without inflection. Remove, remove, retain, remove, remove, retain, remove. By the second dozen, the pattern was clear. A woman in the third row began to cry quietly, not for pity, but for the relief of a math problem you couldn't solve finally showing its work. Elaine stopped touching the mic. She folded her hands and stared at a point on the table as if she could will the grain to change. The clerk paused halfway and spoke into the mic for the record. Interim tally indicates majority in favor of removal. She continued to count. No one moved toward the door. Even the rain seemed to slow to listen. When the last paper lay open, she stacked them, squared the edges, and set them down with deliberate care. Final tally remove. She held up a single sheet, the resolution, so the camera could see the header. She turned it to Elaine. The room didn't gloat. No one clapped. Boone didn't smile. The clerk just pulled the pen from its sleeve and placed it on the line. Elaine looked at it for a full 5 seconds. Then she signed. The camera zoomed a breath closer, glass motor whispering as it found the signature and locked focus. The clerk slid the paper aside to dry and stamped the bottom filed. The sound of the stamp was a soft punch, nothing like a gavel, but final in its own way. Darius leaned toward my shoulder. Justice is boring until it's yours, he said. The chair, new by default, stood and cleared his throat. Per bylaws, the vice chair assumes duties until a special election. He looked out over the room and found me without meaning to. We will correct the record on the gate. We will contact the bank. From the back, a voice carried not angry, just tired. Respect won't cost you a dime. Disrespect always will. Heads nodded like wheat when the wind finally remembers how to move. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a subject line bloom across the lock screen: compliance cleared after leadership change. Maggie's name sat beneath it, paired with a green check. Everbank had closed its loop. The ledger had moved where voices could not. Darius saw the light on my screen. Good news, I stood not higher, just steadier. The holds lifted. After the vote. He let out a slow breath, one hand on the back of the chair in front of him, as if the room needed grounding. Say it, he murmured. I did for the mic, for the minutes, for the room that had stayed to watch paper do what shouting never could. Finally, someone fought back. The clerk typed it into the notes without comment. The rain eased. Outside the parking lot, lamps came into focus, clean circles in the wet. The camera light kept blinking. The first hammer strike rang like a bell. Sun hit the new hinge and flashed a thin blade of light across the rail. Someone laughed, one of the teenagers holding the level, and the sound carried down County Road like the dust from fresh cuts. We were back at the gate, but the feeling was different. Not siege. Repair. The posts stood straighter than I remembered. The board's maintenance crew had brought a portable planer. Boone brought his own tool bag, the leather dark with years of sweat and sun. The new HOA chair showed up with donuts nobody ate, then stayed anyway, and stacked lumber where I pointed. On the sawhorses, a sheet of bronze waited next to my old ruler, the one my father had scratched with inches and X's back when he still believed anything worth building had to outlast his hands. The plaque wasn't engraved yet. It lay warm from the sun edge's taped pencil outline, faint as breath, 1958, 2024. Maggie stepped out of her car in flats, and a windbreaker hair pulled back like she'd be gone in 10 minutes and stayed an hour. She carried a slim folder with a green elastic. The corners were square like bank corners always are. "Good morning," she said. "Smells like oak and barbecue." "Boone started the smoker," I said. "Said we'll glue better with ribs in us." "Science," Maggie said, deadpan. Boone came over with a stapled packet squared and hole-punched. He passed it to me like a flag. Resolution of the board, he said. Shared access by goodwill. I opened it. Plain language, the gate is private property. Community passage allowed by the owner's permission. Any change requires written consent. Annual maintenance fund, not a special assessment, just a standing line. My name where it needed to be. The board's names where they ought to be. No adjectives, no photos, just rules. Records clerk has a copy Boone added, and the camera is reading me into the minutes whether I like it or not. The tripod LED blinked red. Recording. Maggie rattled her folder. Everbank paperwork, she said. Draw 11's back on track. Hold lifted yesterday effective with leadership change. I'm returning 2 exhibits to you for your file. Compliance kept the digital copies. She set a smaller envelope on the tailgate. Also, my card with just one address this time. You won't need it. I tucked the envelope under a magnet on the truck bed. You just lowered my blood pressure by a decade. Ledger did that, she said. I only moved the note where the note wanted to go. The kids ran another 2x6 through the planer and shouted at the curls that flew off like blonde noodles. One dove to catch a long ribbon and wore it as a mustache until someone told him to wash his hands before he touched the food. You ready for the last bolts? Boone asked. Let's finish, I said. He held the rail while I lined the final hinge plate, the steel cool through my gloves. The driver bit clean and sent the screw home with a sound that made the little hairs on my arms rise. I checked swing. The gate moved smooth and honest, no drag, no squeal, just the weight of oak and the quiet of work done right. Children darted through the opening and back again, counting steps, counting laughs, trying to decide whether freedom is wider when someone says yes or when nobody says no at all. One skidded to a stop at my boots and looked up like I was the one who'd invented hinges. Go on, I said. Just don't kick the bronze. They didn't. They shrieked and ran toward the smoker circles widening like ripples. The engraver showed up older man, careful hands. He set the plaque on a felt pad, taped a stencil, and tested depth with a brass scribe. The mic on the tripod picked up the smallest sound, a scratch barely there, a whisper his tool made against the tape. He looked at me over his readers. We keeping the old text? We're honoring it, I said. Add the year we learned how to behave. He nodded, set the tip, and the first cut sang a bright line across the morning. Maggie checked her watch. I should get back. Wait 5 minutes, Boone said. We're making everything official. He walked to the folding table and picked up the document, again stood where the camera could frame him and the gate. He didn't square his shoulders. He didn't need to. When he spoke, it was a reading voice, steady, not performative like someone telling the truth aloud because it belongs there. By action of the board, he read, We adopt shared access by goodwill, recognizing this gate as private property, acknowledging community passage by permission and committing funds to maintenance at the owner's direction. He looked up. We will send a certified copy to the clerk and to Everbank, along with minutes reflecting leadership change and compliance clearance. He lowered the paper. We remind ourselves of first principles. Roads matter. Doors matter. Boundaries matter. Community built on respect. Somewhere behind me, the smoker lid creaked. A sweet stripe of hickory moved past on the air. People exhaled without meaning to. It sounded like relief and appetite. The engraver paused to brush bronze dust away with a soft paintbrush. The letters came up from the metal like something remembered 1958, 2024. I heard my father because certain days invite the dead to sit down without making a scene. Check the swing. Oil the hinge. Don't let anyone tell you lines are rude. He'd have liked Boone, I think. He might even have called Maggie by her first name. She stepped closer to the camera and kept her words for the record. Everbank acknowledges receipt of the board's resolution. Draw 11 continues. No reservations. She hesitated, then allowed herself a line that sounded more like a neighbor than a banker. Good fences don't divide, they define respect. The new chair handed me a small envelope, keys that weren't actually needed. Symbolic. Sometimes symbols are how groups tell themselves what happened. Last bolt, Boone said quietly. I snugged the final nut until the washer kissed the plate, then put my palm to the rail and pushed. The swing was perfect. The kind of perfect that comes from sanded edges and correct math, not luck. The teenagers cheered. The kids ran through again, arms out like airplane wings. A little boy tapped the rail with 2 fingers reverent, then sprinted after the others. The camera blinked. The red LED didn't bother pretending it wasn't watching. Boone lifted the goodwill resolution toward the lens so anyone replaying the file years from now could read the title. For the minutes, he said. For the next board, I added. For the next dust-up, Maggie said, not unkind. We ate on our feet, paper plates, too much sauce. The smoker breathed like a pleased animal. People argued about football schedules and whether the county should pay for a new crosswalk by the diner. The hard lines of yesterday softened without going soft. The engraver cooled the plaque with a damp cloth. Steam rose and drifted toward the ridge, thin as thread. He handed it to me with both hands. Warm, heavy, honest. Boone and the chair guided it onto the posts while I set the bolts and felt the metal seat itself against wood older than most of us in the yard. I wiped the face with a rag that used to be a shirt. The letters caught a blade of sun and held it. We stood there, nobody counting seconds for once. Boone tapped the corner with his knuckle. There. True. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The sun climbed out from behind the trees and threw a clean bar of light across the bronze. The new plaque gleamed bright, still warm, not yet cooled, and for a breath the whole road looked properly drawn. The camera captured the flare and stamped it with a number as if to notarize daylight. The new gate held the first light like it remembered how. A thin gold strip slid across the rail and climbed the posts, warming the fresh bolts we'd set yesterday until they looked almost alive. I stood on the porch with a hot mug and let the steam rinse the chill from my face. From inside the house, the radio voice threaded through the screen door flat. Local matter-of-fact county, Brief Pine Creek, adopts new bylaws on property access. Recorded vote effective immediately. A.J. scolded from the oak. The flag on the porch line lifted and settled like it had something to say but chose to keep it brief. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Maggie. Subject case closed. Loan reinstated. Her body text was 2 lines. Banker simple. Draw 11 reinstated. File marked resolved. Thanks for keeping clean records. I thumbed back a reply that fit the weather. Appreciated. Ledger steady. Across the road, the security camera swiveled a polite degree and stopped red LED winking awake. The new plaque threw a small flare that the lens met and stamped with a time number like a notary. A mother with a stroller passed first, then 3 kids with backpacks that looked bigger than they were. They cut through the gate's opening without thinking about it, like water returning to a creek bed after rock slide clears. One boy slowed, put a hand on the rail, and read the letters the engraver had pulled from the bronze yesterday. 1958-2024. He sounded them out under his breath without getting the hyphen wrong, then jogged to catch up. The little girl at the end of the line hummed. I didn't recognize the tune, but it matched the morning. The radio inside shifted to weather, then backed up with a throwaway line that didn't feel throwaway. Respect wins another round in Marin Valley. I smiled because you don't argue with the radio when it's right. I set the mug on the fence post and crossed to the gate with a rag I'd brought out of habit. Old t-shirt, thin from 100 oil changes. I wiped the face of the plaque in slow circles, lifting yesterday's fingerprints and a ghost of bronze dust the brush had missed. The metal was cool now, the heat gone the shine, not eager, just sure. Boone's words from the paperwork sat in my head like a level that had finally found center-shared access by goodwill. 4 plain words. A hinge sentence you could hang a season on. A car eased past window down, the driver's. Sharp raised the 2 fingers. People raise when they're not formal and not unkind. "Looks true," she called. "It is," I said. A second car slowed and stopped. The new board chair leaned across the wheel. Bank copied us on the closure. Minutes posted by noon. "Good," I said. "Write it short. People remember short." He nodded and rolled on. No speeches, no victory laps. The asphalt already looked less tense. A breeze came up the valley and stepped through the opening like it owned a key. I felt the rail under my palm and the way the wood didn't argue. The hinge made no sound. That's the point of hinges. Quiet strength movement without drama. I thought of my father with stain on his hands, how he'd check swing oil, swing again, then say nothing because a correct arc speaks for itself. The morning made space for him without trying. That's how legacy works when you get out of its way. My phone vibrated again, another email from Maggie. This one with a single line for the permanent record. Everbank notes compliance hold lifted after leadership change. Collateral risk cleared. I filed it into the thread where received 03:17 a.m. Draw suspended, and the rest of the paper bones lived. Skeletons don't scare you when they're exactly where they ought to be. A dog walker paused. Gate swings smooth, he said. It should, I answered. He pointed at the letters. Nice touch. Not mine alone, I said. Neighbors did this. He tipped his cap and moved on. The kids were smaller now at the turn backpacks bobbing. The flag on the porch found a steady line and held it. I leaned close enough to read the plaque without my glasses. The dash between the years looked thin as a hair strong as wire. Time is like that small tensile binding things you don't notice until you lean in. Finally, someone fought back lawfully, I said to the metal to the morning, to the part of me that had waited longer than I knew. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. I stepped back and looked down the road toward Main Street. Somewhere past the curve, the diner bell would chirp, and the corkboard would get a fresh flyer, and the coffee would taste a little burned on purpose. Somewhere at the branch, Maggie would initial a note in a system that doesn't care how anyone feels and therefore treats everyone fairer than moods do. Somewhere at the clerk's counter, a stamped page already cooled beside a blotter. On my side of the fence line, birds argued gently about nothing, and the oak let a single leaf go late. I lifted the rail with 2 fingers and set the swing in motion. The new latch met the post like a handshake. There was a small click, the kind that doesn't brag and doesn't apologize. Light stepped through the slats and striped the drive. I took the mug back up, tasted what was left of the heat, and breathed once for the road ahead. The new bylaws would get tested and argued and amended like all honest rules. The gate would need oil, maybe a shim next spring. The plaque would lose its glare and find its patina. That's how things endure, by not pretending they won't change. The camera blinked red against gold and wrote the moment down in its little square way. I turned toward the house. The sun cleared the ridge cleanly. Behind me, the gate stayed shut because I'd shut it. Ahead of me, the day opened because days do, and the light, steady now, kept going where it was going over the rail across the yard and out into a valley that had learned at least for this round to tell the truth on paper and live it on the ground. The new plaque caught the sun just right, its bronze letters warm beneath my hand. The air smelled of coffee and cut grass, steady as the flag snapping over the porch. On the radio, a clerk's voice read the posted order, Pine Creek's new bylaws sealed and filed. I remembered every hearing, every signature, and the click of the gate closing for the right reason this time. Justice had never been loud. It was steady stamped and done in daylight. The community rebuilt more than a fence, they redrew respect. Finally, someone fought back. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.